It is a brand new edition of Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Welcome to the month of December. I remember in July when it was ending, we were heading into August going, this is the last full month with no hockey. Now here we are in December, for goodness sake. Joining us on this Monday edition, as he always does, it is a wonderful edition on Mondays. It is Mondays with Meltzer from NHL.com and PhiladelphiaFlyers.com. Bill joins us. Bill, what a week. We teed this week up last week with your visit. And I got to say, I'm a little stunned at what took place this week.
Oh, for sure. Well, 4 games in 6 nights, a tough gauntlet of games, and, come away with a perfect week. So that, that was unbelievable. And Flyers stole one. They had no business winning.
Oh, my goodness.
Played a great game on Black Friday. And just funny how the outlook can change in a week's time in the NHL. I think sometimes we get so caught up, particularly early in the season, and thinking that what happens early in the season is just going to stay that way. Of course, you have to remind yourself too. It's a long season. There's ups and there's downs, but what an unbelievable week, and what a way to finish it too in overtime. So
unbelievable. Of course you have recency bias in how you feel at a moment about a team. But the beginning of a season is more magnified, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a harbinger of things to come. And this week kind of proves that. Let's start off kind of with the overall big picture here, Bill, because we're 25 games into this season. And when I put this, I like to go back and look at last year and year by year comparisons. At this time last year, 25 in, the Flyers had a record of 13-10-2. Now they have a record of 12-10-3. So just 1 point in the standings difference. They're also in the playoffs as we record this as well as wild card number 2. Not only that, Bill, but they've only scored 1 less goal than they scored last year, which seems almost crazy because this team has been shut out 3 times. Has won a couple of games where they've only scored 2 goals, but they're only tracking 1 goal behind. They have allowed more. They've allowed 13 more goals, but pretty amazing that they sit where they sit when the biggest question mark coming in was goaltending, and Erson's been out for a lot of it.
No, for sure. I think one of the most positive developments in the last few weeks has been, sometimes adversity creates opportunity, right? And here you've had Fedotov with an opportunity and Kolosov with an opportunity, and they've both come take it and run with it. The Flyers will have a tough decision coming up when Sam is back. To me, there's still no doubt that Sam Ersson is your number 1 goalie. He's the number 1, the main guy you're going to lean on. But now you have some decisions to make that are of the good kind of hard decision, because Kolosov, I thought Kolosov was very impressive. Last game in particular, that for a while, for a long time, even heading in, I thought, boy, he might get a shutout tonight. He just had the look about him. And when Binnington would step up, and then Kolosov was caught on, he'd make a big save. I mean, it really was a pretty fun goalies duel for a lot of the night. Whereas with Fedotov, it still isn't pretty with him a lot of the time, but he's been finding ways to stop the puck. So that's clearly been a big part of it. But just you can kind of look up and down that suddenly you have some hard decisions to make. You have more than one line's been stepping up, different players, different nights. I mean that's what it takes to win in the league. That obviously has to keep up. I think that in terms of where the team's in the standings, I think a piece of it is that not to dwell on a negative point, but just to bring up something interesting. That if you look across the NHL, no team has fewer regulation wins than the Flyers 5, right? Yeah. But the Flyers have been finding ways to get it done in overtime, winning shootout games, and you worry about that if it comes down to tiebreakers at the end. But the bottom line is, if they've been trailing, they've been coming back in third periods. If they don't hold a lead, they've still been finding ways to win in overtime, and they've won most of their shootouts too. That to me is the next step along the evolutionary path, where if it might not be going great in a particular night or segments of a game, they've still been finding ways to get points. I'd like to find a way to lead too. Yeah, exactly. So There've been a lot of positive developments, things they can continue to build off of too. So, we'll see what happens after this stretch of off days. But they've actually put themselves in a pretty good position heading into December, which we would not have said, which I certainly wouldn't have said a couple of weeks ago.
Especially when you consider some of the injuries they dealt with, in particular on the blue line, way they've been able to come. We'll get to that. When I look at Fedotov's numbers, Bill, outside of his first 3 games, which were statistically and by the eye test, pretty disastrous. I mean, he had 839 save percentage in his first game, 792, and then an 826. But since then, he's got 6 games. He's gone 4-1-1 with a 909. League average right now is 900 on the button. Right. He's ahead of that. And then you look at Kolosov, his first 3 games were not great either. He had 833, he had a 909 in his second game, that game against Boston where he only allowed 2 goals, and an 853. But since then, in the 4 games, he's 3-1. He's got a 913 save percentage. And I could tell in that Blues game, I'm watching, I agree with you. I thought he maybe ticketed for the shutout. And the first goal he gave up, it was the 3rd shot that beat him after he made 2 unbelievable saves. And then the save that he makes on the blocker on the 2-on-1, where I think it's Sanheim defending, and Sanheim takes away the pass. So Kolosov knows I can take a little ice, and he comes out, challenges the shooter. Then Sanheim tries to take away the time of Braden Shen, and it was a good shot from just inside the top of the circle. And not only did he make the blocker save, but it was boom, it was confident, angled the blocker down into the corner. And I look at that, that guy's seeing the puck off the stick. And that shows me a dialed-in guy that's comfortable in his environs as well. I mean, Flyers still below league average in save percentage as a team, but of late, that's not been the case. Is maybe the biggest thing here, Bill, for this success, that the team concept and structure defensively is really kind of the catalyst, because they don't win that Nashville game where they stunk out loud for 59 minutes and 50 seconds. If they don't have the team concept, they don't block north of 30 shots in the game.
No, for sure. Well, if you look at how the team started to improve things after the just brutal start after the first 7 games of the season, the first thing that they did was just get back to taking away the middle of the ice, blocking shots, reinstituting some kind of a structure in their own end. And then they had to build piece by piece on that. And it still hasn't been there every night. Like the Nashville game was a good example where they spent most of the night in their own end of the ice. It's going to be a challenge coming up against Florida to not have that kind of a game, but overall they've been able to build off of that, generate breakouts, generate chances in transition, some 2-on-1s, creating turnovers, getting up ice, staying connected as 5-man units, all that kind of build off of that defensive structure, and then they've added the pieces to it. And there's still things they had to get right. Like the power play, which was so good for the first 8 games, has been AWOL for the most part since then. But there have been a lot of elements that they've added into the game, but that's where it all started. It all started with the structure and the defensive zone.
Bill, we can say it maybe started also with the call-up of Emil Andrae.
Sure.
Because since he's been here, Bill, the Flyers have gone 10-3-2 in his 15 games since he's been here. And he's kind of unlocked a variability in who he plays with. He was when he first got here, obviously York was out, and he elevated himself to the top pair pretty quickly to play with Sanheim. And then when York came back, he's playing with Ristolainen, and Ristolainen's playing the best hockey I've ever seen him play.
I was going to say that pair has been really, really good, and particularly in terms of Ristolainen, and not just defensive zone. I mean, I think that we saw it even last year, but he had a lot of injuries last year. Even the year before that, he had a lot of injuries. When he was healthy and in the lineup, you could see what a difference Bradshaw worked with him. Took a lot of the plays where he takes himself out of position. I mean, for a number of years there, Risto was leading all NHL defensemen in hits, but it came at a cost. It came at a cost of him being out of position a lot. And I think that just in terms of reeling it in a little bit, using his size, his reach, and
his legs.
And in his legs. I was going to say, he's always had an ability when healthy to get up and down the ice. And he's been doing that well. I mean, he just had a stretch of 4 straight games to the point. There were assists. But
3 of them primaries too, by the way, that were down below the top of the circle.
right, and he made a couple plays of the first penalty kill of the game, where he was almost a one-man penalty kill in those situations, where he was just killing plays in the corner and muscling guys off, and all of a sudden the puck's out of the zone, and the other team's going back 200 feet to go get it. I mean that's been a huge positive, and just you could see why there are so many reports that teams are after Ristolainen, and even though this isn't the option year in his contract where he's impending free agent, but you could see why teams would go, boy, if we're a playoff team, he's never played a playoff game. That's the guy who would be just a bear to play against in a playoff series. That's always been the word, and you've been seeing some of these games against tough opponents. The Flyers played some good teams, and those have been some of his best games. So that's been another really positive thing that's shown itself.
In that hideous Nashville game, I thought he was the only player that played well in the game.
Yep.
Until the end. But in the second period, he gets a puck at his own blue line, just moving his legs, skates himself out of danger, dumps it, and then just buries a guy in the offensive left corner. And another opportunity, that's when they had their best scoring chance of that second period off of that play that he makes. It's really been remarkable. And, as for Emil, I mean, the way he sees the ice is something we talk about quite a bit. Helge Grans ended up as a healthy scratch in the last game. Had to get Zamula to get back in. You can't just keep Zamula and not play him. You're going to have to do that a little bit. Helge, I thought had a good week overall, though I thought in the Nashville game was a little loose with the puck in his own end, and maybe it was a good chance for him to reset. But he looks like an NHL player, Bill. Is this the situation where the structure and detail of NHL players, as guys come up, sometimes they're better in that because it's more predictable environment?
Yeah. And I mean, he's always had the athleticism and the size. It's why he was a top 35 pick to begin with.
Yeah.
It's really kind of been, playing within a structure, knowing what he can and can do within that structure. But even some plays up ice. I mean, he's actually been contributing a little bit on the offensive end too. But I think on the whole, it's really been a positive bringing up. And he does look like he's a guy, who could contribute in your top six somewhere if there's a spot for him. So that's, again, sometimes adversity creates opportunity, and that's the guy who's taking advantage of that opportunity. And once again, giving the Flyers a decision to make. I think if Zamula didn't have to get back in the lineup if he hadn't been sitting, because you want to cross that threshold from where hunger goes to rust. I think somebody used that terminology, and I think it's a good analogy where you don't want a guy sitting out too long. So I think he did need to come back in, but Grans certainly instilled confidence where if you want him, have an opportunity for him in your lineup, I think there's a degree of confidence he can come in and do a pretty good job for you.
And he's a right shot guy too. That's another part of the equation for sure. Danny Briere is really going to have a lot of interesting decisions on the horizon here, Bill. We're going to move on to Michkov and some other things in just a second. But when it comes to when Sam Ersson comes back, I mean, can we look at this as cut and dry and say the only guy that's waiver exempt is Kolosov and he needs to go back? Or I think there's probably a small window of time that you hang on to the 3 to make sure Sam is back and can stay healthy. But that can't be long term. Is it as simple as Kolosov has to go back? And do you think we're still in this consideration mode that if Kolosov goes back, he's going, well, I want to go back to the KHL? I think we're probably beyond that at this point.
Well, yeah, because you've seen that he at least has the potential to be.
What good does it do him to go back to the KHL?
It really doesn't.
And he's not a call up
really
if Fedotov or Ersson get hurt.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's potentially your starter, or at least your 50-50 starter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they've been alternating starts without Sam around. And I thought there was almost a deadline point to when he would have to make the decision to go back. And
we heard early December. Yeah.
And we're in December now. So I think that it's kind of at the point where even if he were to go back to the Phantoms, first of all, there's not a competition for ice time. With all due respect to Cal Peterson, that would be, that'd be Kolosov's net. He'd be unless you're doing one of those 3-and-3 kind of deals. He'd be starting almost every game.
Yeah.
And if you're calling him up, you're not calling him up to sit. You are calling him up to play a significant amount of time. It's not just, it's not just practice time and you're on the bench. So there's definitely some of it. He's earned the opportunity and he's taken advantage of the opportunity recently. I don't see where it would be beneficial to him to go back to the KHL, but I do think it might come down to that as the short-term decision as to where, he's still in his entry-level deal. So he's immune from having to go through waivers, and it might come down to that, but that can change in a couple of weeks too, where he comes back up and he's playing again. So
yeah, a drop of a dime, it can all change very quickly. And look, it'll be explained to him and his agent that you go back to the KHL. If somebody goes down and we need to call, we can't call you back and say, hey, you can't do that. And look, I don't know that Fedotov would be claimed on waivers right now still anyway, but that's not the point. You can't risk that, especially with McAnemy already down. We talk about organizational depth at goaltending and how fleeting it is. And you see that McAnemy goes down and you see the trickle down effect of that. Same thing on the blue line, Bill. Jamie Drysdale, this was deemed as a not that significant of an injury, but now it's dragged on here on IR for quite a period of time. Does he fall into the category where he can be sent down for a conditioning stint with the Phantoms? And how does this situation play out? Because the way the D-Corps is playing of late, it's going to be hard to just gift him back into the lineup based on who you traded him for.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it has been. It's been several weeks at this point. It's let's see. I guess it was the same day the Flyers were playing. I think it was the San Jose game.
Correct.
Was where the news broke. So that's it's been a while at this point. So he might be eligible and have that opportunity to go down for the 2 weeks with the Phantoms. It might just to restore a little bit of confidence too.
Yeah,
I think that
his decision making has been one of his areas of concern.
For sure. So I think that might be beneficial all the way around. You kind of kick the can of the decision down 2 weeks and see what else develops. As we've seen, as we've been talking about, things can change in a hurry. So, by all means, the Flyers are still going to need Jamie Drysdale at some point here, and they're going to need him playing up to the level that they need it, that they expect and hope that he'll play up to. But right now you have a good rotation going. So if he has the opportunity to go and get his timing back, get some confidence back, that could help everybody.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, you're making decisions from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness. And that's a different thing for Danny Briere, who's come under a little fire in the last couple of days on Flyers Twitter, Bill, because he did not trade for Jiricek with the Columbus Blue Jackets. We all saw the package that was sent to the Minnesota Wild and that Columbus received from the Wild. And you'd have to presume that probably what Columbus was looking for was probably Emil Andrae and very similar picks.
Yeah.
And, some people go, well, Jiricek is 6th overall pick, a big right-hand D, hasn't gotten it done in the NHL just yet. Granted, things have been obviously very messy in Columbus. But, I look at this situation, and while they may have a top D, I don't know yet. I'm not saying they do in Travis Sanheim, but they may have that. And you do have Bonk. I don't know that he's a top pairing right shot D as well. But this notion that, and I just think that fan base just can't put themselves through this. Every time there's a shiny object available, you can't freak out when you don't get it. And to me, the big thing is, and I got this email from my good buddy Ed Ritty, who always hangs out with Coatsy and does some caddying for him down there at the Ocean City area. He said, really enjoying the pod this year. He said, a lot of angry Twitter fans missing out on Jiricek. I think the emergence of Sanheim, Flyers don't see the need of a top defenseman like they used to. And that's even if they considered Jiricek a possible number one, which he said, I don't think he is. And that's educated hockey. His old man started the program at Malvern Prep. He said, if you make the trade, and this is the big point, then you lose assets to pursue a top center, which might be the most difficult position to fill. And he mentioned a couple of guys. I think Vegas is going to be looking to add to their decor and forward depth for the playoffs. And they have two youngish centers that he would go after, Howden and Roy at the NHL level. And then maybe Rossi in Minnesota. They asked for a lot and you'd have to pay him. Or maybe Savoy in Edmonton's system, who I remember in his draft year we liked. And maybe you shop Ristolainen and Lawton and a late first to get that done. You can't just every time there's a shiny object, just start going after it. You have to be really strategic in this. And I think people are thinking, Danny can't close. I think that's a load of BS.
Yeah, I think that, well, first with Jiricek, right? Yeah, his development path so far, and he's still very young.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a reason why he still has spent more time with Cleveland than he spent with Columbus.
There's a concern there.
There's a concern there. His development curve so far has taken longer than has been hoped. There's not a consistency level there. Now, would he be the first defenseman with really high upside who took a lot of time? No, he wouldn't. Nope. Would it be the first guy whose first organization gets the growing pains and the second one gets the rewards? No, far from that. But there's just so many guys who never develop. What if and we not picked. Obviously, wasn't he was in draft pick, but I remember some when we went through with like Phil Myers, where he had all the physical tools in the world, and it just felt like Phil never hit that next level with any consistency.
He could never pull it all together.
Now, will Jiricek do that? He may. He very well might. Is it a guarantee? It's not. If the Flyers felt enough confidence level to be able to trade an Emil Andrae, a first round pick, whatever other assets go in, or not filler at that point, but it's the main points are the young defenseman in the first round pick. Those are the main things you're giving up. If you felt a reasonable degree of confidence, this is going to be a top, even not even a number one center, top two, even a second pair guy, your top three, I would say, pull the trigger on it, because those kind of guys are really valuable. On the other hand, there's a risk, and there's a risk factor that's not an insignificant risk. So I'm okay with it. Would have been interesting to see him coming out, absolutely. But to me, was it a make or break? You absolutely have to have this guy trade. To me, if it would have involved a young center, that would have been, well, go for it. You have to see.
That's a position of desperation that you need. The D's not.
Pretty close to. But even some of the guys you've been mentioning, they're like Rossi, small center. Yeah,
you want to be big and long up the middle.
You can mix a small center in there. You have Luchenko coming in a year. Hopefully Frost recent surge can continue through the rest of this year. Got this typical slow start. Maybe the final 3/4 of the season looks more like he did for half a year or 2/3 of a year. But clearly it's a need. You really need that big number one center. It is so hard to find those guys. You almost have to draft them. They're rarely available in trade, and they don't often get the free agency either. Teams said to extend them beforehand. So you're either going to get a guy who's been underachieving, and you're hoping that the change of scenery or has had some kind of injury issues, maybe can turn it around with you. But
you're going to overpay if you do. You're going to overpay.
You're going to overpay a lot. You're going to overpay a lot because teams hoard their centers. Yeah. And if they're a good center, particularly pretty young center, they're almost never available. If you're going to get them, you're paying so much for them that you really do need all of your resources. You need all your resources anyway, just because in terms of depth, and you never know what's going to happen in a middle or late first round pick, or even sometimes later in the draft too. That's why, to me, I'm a believer in having those assets, because sometimes a player will come along and be a lot more than you thought he would be going in his draft year, or even the year after a draft. So to me, I pretty conservative philosophy, I'll admit, but I believe in hanging on to your assets unless you're sure, right? And when you're also dealing from a position of weakness, you're trading that much more back in return. Long term, absolutely. Flyers need a number one center. I don't know that Jet Luchenko is going to be the number one center. I don't think you have that number one guy in the NHL level or the American League level. Long term, that's something the Flyers I think absolutely need to hit that next level. But you have to wait till the opportunity is there. You can't force it when it isn't there.
You look at a guy like Dylan Cousins. Is that a guy you'd look at targeting?
But potentially, because he had that really, I think, a 30-goal year a couple of years
Yeah.
ago.
It's there. It just needs to be
he's there.
nurtured.
It's there. Yeah, he's kind of gone a little bit backwards since then.
Yeah.
I know if I were Buffalo, I wouldn't be fired up to trade, but maybe he's available. That's the guy who might be able to kind of figure out what hasn't been working, reel it in, and step forward from there. That might be a guy who might benefit from moving on somewhere else. That'd be the kind of player that you might be able to pull something off, and if it clicks, then you might have your solution there. That's a player I would certainly have interest in. But I mean, it's a limited number of guys. Like I don't think Zegras should ever be that guy, even if he played center for you. So
to me, I mean, the Zegras thing, like bring him in to be your 1C. It's not even a center.
Yeah,
I don't even see him as
not
a
ideally,
center, let alone as a 1C. Yeah. Obviously Michkov is once again lit the world on fire, and his flair for the dramatic. I think he's been good in all zones for the most part. He's got a lot of gamer in him too. Like he is not backing down to anybody. He took one to the chops the other night, was bleeding from the lip. I mean, took a shot, and maybe it was the Nashville game where he took the punch. He just doesn't back down, and I think he's just such a competitor. But when you have a team that's bereft of center talent, I had gotten a tweet from a guy, Andy, and he said, "Are we sure that Michkov can't be a top line center? He's already the best passer playmaker on the team." And my point was, you don't want to force him into the middle, number one, because it's a different game there in the middle. I think he's a flank player that attacks from the outside in. I like him moving into the middle. Plus, and another guy said, well, and I cited Panarin. He's the Rangers' best player. Yeah. And he's a winger. You don't have to be a center to be the best player. And he said, well, Panarin didn't have half the puck skills that Michkov does. Well, I would maybe pump the brakes on half the puck. Yeah. He's got a whole ton of puck skills. And he said he's more of a shooter, which is why he's a wing. I don't agree with that either. But he said this kid is so talented, he actually could have no idea what the center position is, which he does, and still in 2 years become one of the best Cs in the league. And I just disagree. Because in the D zone, the responsibility drags you below the dots a ton. Yes. And he's not a guy that's going to be able to lead a rush. And I think he's so good leading a rush. Why am I going to take that away? I got to find him the right center. I'm not just going to make him the center to water him down. I need to find the right center for him.
Yeah. Well, kind of take one point at a time here. As the center, you are the last one to lead the defensive zone.
Yep.
As you said, you're not really leading the rush up the ice. You're joining the rush in a lot of cases. You could take away. Yes, it was a 3-on-3 situation, so it's a little bit different. But he had a breakaway goal a couple weeks before that. That's always going to be a winger who gets one of those. Your center's never that far up ice to get one of those. I think he's been really good back checking. He's not great once you're in your own defensive zone, though.
Yeah.
He's not the guy one protecting the house necessarily. So, I think that he'd end up in a number of mismatches against much bigger centermen. I don't think that's the right situation for him. They tried him in the KHL. No mind it was preseason, but they tried him at center in the KHL season. Not this season, but the previous season, and he was a little overmatched in his own zone, and that's against KHL talent. I don't think it's the right situation for him. I think he's a natural winger. Nothing wrong with that. He'll help you along, and he will create. He'll create a lot of plays off the wing. Like David Jiricek was a playmaking winger and had size, but nobody ever thought of moving Jake to the middle, and nor should they
skate like the wind.
Right. Right. And it's, it just wasn't the right spot for him. He was a winger. Same thing with Michkov, who's a smaller guy. In terms of finding the right center for him, long term, we'll see who that might be. right now, I do think that one thing that's kind of starting to show itself a little bit. They were together in the preseason. You know, Michkov that 2-on-1 play where he set up Tippett to the goal. And first of all, great patience on an even better pass.
Yeah.
But who started the 2-on-1? It was a bounce pass from Frost out to create that 2-on-1.
An area pass, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, they showed chemistry in camp. Even the little touch play that even a couple games ago, Frost had the goal and the assist, and Michkov had that goal in front of the net. And if Frost kept that puck alive in the crease, little tap play, but it goes out to Michkov and he scores. I think there's chemistry there. Just kind of stick with it, at least for the rest of this year, and see how that develops.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see. You know, we'll see how it fits in long term. But you know, and especially right now, the Flyers are getting a little bit of production out of the middle of the ice, which has been another positive development in the last couple of weeks. Long term, you know, maybe that guy is Luchenko, right? Maybe you know, maybe Frost has a good season for the final 3 quarters. He's off to a good start this past week. Maybe that continues. Still, long term, you'd like to have that number one center, but you know, but right now, Michkov, whoever he's with, he's a threat out there. So I'm not moving his position. That's really the bottom line as I see it.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about the center, oftentimes 95% of the time last forward to leave the D zone. I also don't want him as F3.
Right.
I want him as one of the first 2 forwards into the zone. I don't want him as the trailing forward. So I just don't think that his skill set, which is considerable, obviously, lends to that. The pass he makes to Tippett under
unbelievable.
He's got front pressure coming, and then Justin Falk's bearing down him on back pressure. Yeah. I thought he waited too long.
I did too.
I mean, he gave Tippett a pass that he said, "Dude, you got no choice. You got to score this. You can't miss this."
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what Tippett needed too, because I thought Tippett looked like he had a little jump after that.
Yeah.
To unleash him, and that, like, I look at the team, and I go, okay, let's look at some things just on paper. The most obvious line on paper to me is Frost, Michkov, Tippett. It's got to get done on the ice with consistency, and I think that maybe they're starting to develop that now. We'll see if it's sustainable, but when I look at on paper, that the skill sets just line up.
Yeah,
it just makes too much sense for it not to work. Doesn't mean it will, but it could.
Yeah. No, it could. Yeah, you have a couple guys who can make plays. Tippett's more of a shoot first guy, right? Tippett and Frost are both pretty good skaters. Obviously, Tippett's a really good skater. Michkov, I think is more speed than he's given credit for. Sometimes he puts on a burst. It's like, wow, where that
back check?
That one back checking play. That's the fastest I've ever seen him skate. Right?
Yeah.
And he's shown that when he sees a lane there, he can get a little separation too sometimes. Yeah. So, you know, it's more about quickness anyway. But I think there's something that it's worth staying with the team winning right now. It gives you the opportunity to stay patient, kind of keep your lines together and see what can develop, what you can run with.
Bill is our resident historian for the Flyers. I'm not looking for just historical precedent, but what he has done since coming here. 3 overtime goals. I think there's 3 other players that did it as a teenager. He's done it in 23 games,
yeah.
Which is pretty. I think Crosby, it took him 69 games.
Yeah.
Kovalchuk, I think, was about 100 as a teenager to get to 3. He's going to obviously become the top teenager with overtime game winners this season. But just what he's done to electrify this team, this fan base, a guy who was billed as maybe as a savior, which is wrong in my opinion, but he's come in and really smashed it out of the park here. And you also can look at when he was scratched and what he's done since he's returned. It's pretty damn remarkable.
For sure. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, even before he was scratched, it just seems that the deeper you get into games, the better he gets, the more he wants the puck on his stick. Those are things you can't teach. Those are all just innate.
Is he learning what the opposition does and then he exploits it as he plays the games?
I think he is. I think he's starting to understand as to how teams are gonna try to check him, and what space there is for him to get, where the opportunities are for him. And as he starts playing against some of these guys repeatedly, and this is his second time against St. Louis, he's going to get a book on guys too. They might get a book on him too, then they will. But he's a smart player. He'll know what this guy did the last time, or when that time comes a year ago, whatever the case might be, and he'll just have that mental Rolodex that the very best players have. I have no doubt he's going to be one of those guys that can do that.
Bill, without a question to me, this afternoon, Travis Konechny will be named to the Four Nations Team Canada.
That should.
He's been unbelievable. And the way he sets up that Michkov goal in overtime with that defensive strip and then kind of lacrosse it off his stick is just part and parcel to what he has been, the way he is playing. I think Sanheim is about a coin flip, but you fully expect Konechny's on that team, don't you?
I would be shocked if he wasn't. I mean, especially with the decision coming this week. Just had a 20-point month, was an all-star last year. I think that
kills penalties, plays power play.
He's earned that, and not just killing penalties, but being one of the predominant shorthanded scoring threats. You go to some international major tournament where, I mean, it's always a big thing, NHL or wherever, but a guy who could decide a game with a shorthanded goal off of a breakaway. I mean, just how much value that brings on top of what he brings the other ways. To me, it's almost a no-brainer that the Konechny should be on that team. In every hockey federation, there are always politics.
Oh yeah.
We were talking. We were mentioning Rasmus Ristolainen. I think he fell a little bit on the wrong side of the politics of the Finnish national team for a number of years. He did, not as a junior player, but once he got to the NHL, there were times. Well, Rasmus has never played in an NHL playoff series, but he's not typically on Team Finland for the Worlds.
Yeah.
Right. So he just kind of fell on the wrong side of that, to where there were times he probably deserved to go but didn't. But I don't see there's any way you could justify holding Konechny back off of that roster. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't see it either, the way he's performing. I want to give out two areas of stick taps real quick before we wrap up, Bill. Number one, the play of Garnet Hathaway.
Yes.
I mean, he's generated more great scoring chances and been involved in the offense. He doesn't punch a lot of goals. He's never going to. But stick taps to Garnet Hathaway's playing his rear end off.
Yeah, saved the goal too, right?
Saved the goal.
On the PK, just saved the goal last game.
Yep, and also blocked a shot with the inside of his wrist. I thought that thing was snapped. He'd be done for a while, but he's a tough dude, smart dude too, out of Brown University. And then the other stick taps, and I sent him a text preemptively and said, just so you know, I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm going to give you some kudos in Monday's Flyers Daily with Bill to Kim Dillabaugh.
Yes.
The goalie coach does not get recognized. He does not do media. We get him on here every once in a while, and I'm efforting that. But the job that he's done amidst a language barrier with two goalies over the last 6 months, with the Kolosov that doesn't want to be here unless he's in the NHL, managing that. The goalie coach manages those guys. It's almost like a wide receiver room for an NFL team, or the running back room. Really, Jeff Stoutland manages the offensive line for the Eagle. Kim's got to manage all of that in a very difficult position where there's one net. Yeah. And what he's been able to do from managing that mentally for those guys, coming out of Carter Hart in that situation last year with Sam, and then managing that with the technical aspects of the position of goaltending, and two guys coming over from a land far, far away and a galaxy far away a long time ago, whatever the Star Wars saying is, to do what they've done. Major stick taps to a really good man in Kim Dillabaugh. It's mind-blowing the job that he's done.
Yeah, and now Kim has a pretty long body of work, so you can look at the variety of goaltending styles that he's worked with, the really A to Z gamut of personalities, and everybody, particularly in net, has to be coached a little bit differently because, as you said, you're as much managing the person as you are the technical aspects. And I've never heard anything but praise on or off the record, I might add, from any of the goalies that he's worked with here. So when you have that kind of across the board praise to every goalie he's worked with, has enjoyed working with him, that has benefited from him too.
Yeah.
Even you go back a couple of years to Martin Jones had a really good year.
Yes, he did.
It's just I think that is a testament to, as you said, it's a staff guy who doesn't often get a lot of attention or credit, but I do think it's merited. And you look at how the goalies have played recently under duress, I might add, that I think it certainly is. It's very appropriate to tip a cap to him.
So. And as Dilly said, it's not about me. Of course, he said, you don't need to give me my tires or anything. It's the guys and the team in front of them and all that. Yeah. Exactly what I would expect Dilly to say. And I know 99.5% of the Flyer fans couldn't pick Dilly out of a lineup, just the way he likes it. So, Dilly, great job. I was going to do it anyway, despite the fact he said I didn't need to. As a card-carrying goaltending union member, I was going to give this massive goalie stick taps to Kim Dillabaugh. Great stuff, Bill. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com and NHL.com. We got a huge surprise this week. We're going to have a combo interview with Matvei Michkov and Alexei Kolosov right here on Flyers Daily coming up this week. So check us out then. We'll be back tomorrow, though. We'll crank it up. Everybody join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.